The briefing room buzzed with the kind of tense energy that made Jack feel right at home. Across from him stood the alien contingent, all regal postures and unreadable faces. He should have felt intimidated by their height and glowing skin, but instead, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. If they were here to fight, they couldn't be all bad. Then she walked in. She was stunning in a terrifying way, like a thunderstorm wrapped in a battle suit. Her violet eyes scanned the room with the precision of someone who could kill a man in 4 moves and still have time to sip tea. "This is Zyra Valaris," said the mission coordinator, a frazzled human named Lieutenant Harper. "She'll be your partner for this operation." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Partner, huh? You sure she's not here to kill me for fun?" Zyra's gaze locked on him, cold as deep space. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have seen me coming." "Charming," Jack muttered, leaning forward. "All right, Zyra, you and me, huh? This should be fun." Zyra's jaw tightened, her voice sharp. "This is not fun. It is necessity. Do not confuse the two." Lieutenant Harper cleared his throat, clearly eager to avoid a fight. "Moving on. Your mission is to infiltrate the Pleasure Gala on Amorath 9. The dictator has enslaved his people using a device that manipulates their pleasure centers, rendering them docile. Your goal is to disable the device without detection." "Pleasure Gala?" Jack interrupted, grinning. "Now we're talking." Harper ignored him. "The only way to gain access is by posing as a bonded couple. Zyra's combat abilities and your adaptability make you the ideal team." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "I will not touch him." "You'll have to," Harper said, his tone firm. "The gala has strict rules. Only bonded pairs are allowed entry." Jack grinned wider. "Guess we're about to make history, sweetheart. First interspecies power couple." Zyra's fists clenched at her sides. "Do not call me that." All right, Jack said, hands raised in mock surrender. "How about darling instead?" Harper groaned. "Focus. You'll need to convince everyone at the gala that you're deeply bonded. This includes physical displays of affection." Zyra's face froze, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "I will not engage in such primitive acts." "Primitive?" Jack laughed. "Lady, you're in for a treat. Human bonding rituals are an art form. And lucky for you, I'm an artist." "Do you ever stop talking?" Zyra asked flatly. "Nope," Jack said with a wink. The tension in the room was palpable as Harper moved to the next slide in his presentation. "You'll also need to familiarize yourselves with each other's customs to avoid suspicion. Zyra, Jack will teach you human bonding behaviors. Jack, Zyra will brief you on Amorathian etiquette." Jack leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. "So, when do we start the honeymoon?" Zyra turned to Harper, her voice icy. "If he continues this behavior, I cannot guarantee his safety." Harper sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This mission is bigger than either of you. If we fail, Amorath 9 remains under the dictator's control. Millions will suffer." Jack's grin faded slightly. All right. I'll play nice." Zyra crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "I will comply for the mission's success. Nothing more." "That's the spirit," Jack said, clapping his hands together. "Now, where do we start? Holding hands? Eye contact? Or do we jump straight to making out?" Zyra didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jack to follow her. As they exited, he couldn't help but mutter under his breath, "This is going to be the best, or worst, mission of my life." Jack stood in the training room, arms crossed, watching Zyra eye him like he was a ticking time bomb. "Look," he started. "It's not rocket science. Humans do this all the time." Zyra folded her arms, glaring. "If humans do this all the time, then why must we waste time practicing?" "Because," Jack said with a grin, stepping closer, "you flinch every time I move. That's not gonna sell our story." He extended a hand. "Lesson 1, holding hands. Easy. Simple. 0 explosions." Zyra's expression didn't shift, but she hesitantly reached out, her gloved hand brushing his. The moment their palms touched, she yanked back like she'd been burned. See? That's what I'm talking about, Jack exclaimed. You are emitting excessive heat, Zaira said flatly, inspecting her hand as if expecting it to combust. Jack chuckled. Lady, that's just good oil body warmth. I haven't even started trying yet. This is ridiculous, she muttered, pacing. Why must your people insist on unnecessary physical contact? Words should suffice. Sure, Jack said, leaning casually against the console. And what happens when someone offers us a toast? Or when we have to dance? Her eyes widened. Dance? Oh yeah, Jack said, relishing her reaction. The pleasure gala's all about mingling, swaying, getting cozy. You know, blending in. I will not sway, she said, her voice dripping disdain. Not with that attitude, Jack shot back. Now come on. Gloves off. Let's get you used to a little contact. She hesitated, then slowly peeled off her gloves, revealing smooth, iridescent skin. Jack raised an eyebrow. Well, I'll be damned. That's not so bad, is it? Zaira didn't reply, her jaw tight as she placed her hand in his. He gently closed his fingers around hers, noting how her skin felt almost electric. See? Not so scary. Her expression remained stoic, but Jack noticed the subtle twitch in her jaw. Your grip is tolerable, she admitted reluctantly. High praise, he said with a smirk. Before he could push his luck further, a small device on Zaira's wrist beeped. She looked down sharply. What did you do? Me? Nothing, Jack said, holding up his free hand in innocence. Her eyes narrowed as the device emitted a soft hum, and suddenly, a fine mist sprayed out around them. What the hell is that? Jack coughed, waving a hand in front of his face. Zaira's expression turned mortified. It's a sensory enhancer, she said through gritted teeth. Jack blinked. What now? An aphrodisiac, she hissed, stepping back, her cheeks, were they glowing, flushed. Jack froze, then burst out laughing. Oh, this just keeps getting better. Didn't know you came with built-in mood lighting. This is not funny, Zaira snapped, her voice rising. Are you kidding? This is comedy gold, Jack said, still grinning. What, you gonna start reciting poetry next? Zaira glared at him, but her breathing was heavier, her normally composed demeanor starting to crack. Shut up and fix this. Fix it? Jack repeated, still laughing. Lady, I'm human, not a miracle worker. The door hissed open, and Lieutenant Harper stepped in, immediately wrinkling his nose. What is that smell? Jack pointed at Zaira, his grin widening. Her idea of foreplay. Harper groaned. I don't want to know. Just clean yourselves up and focus. We're on a tight schedule. As the door closed, Zaira shot Jack a murderous look. You will not speak of this. Scout's honor, Jack said, still chuckling. But hey, you didn't flinch that time. Progress! Zaira growled under her breath, snatching her gloves and storming out of the room. Jack leaned against the wall, watching her go, his grin fading into something softer. You're gonna be the death of me, aren't you? He muttered to himself, shaking his head before heading out after her. Jack paced nervously in the cramped starship quarters, his grin faltering as Zaira stood stiffly by the door, staring at him like he'd grown a second head. All right, lesson 3, blending in at a gala. The secret is confidence. You gotta act like you belong. She tilted her head. I belong on the battlefield, not among indulgent fools engaging in primitive rituals. First of all, Jack said, pointing at her, nobody's saying you can't be a badass warrior. But at this gala, you're supposed to be a badass warrior in love. Zaira's face twisted in confusion. Love? That's not relevant to this mission. It's the entire point of the cover. Jack threw his hands up. People are gonna expect us to be all over each other. Smiling, laughing, maybe a little. He paused, his grin turning devilish. Touchy. Zaira's shoulders stiffened. Touchy? You know, arm around the waist, hand on the back, maybe even a kiss. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. I will not allow your lips anywhere near mine. Jack sighed dramatically. Fine. We'll table that for later. But the waist thing? That's non-negotiable. Here, watch. He stepped closer, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture, and lightly placed one hand on her waist. Zaira immediately recoiled. That's what I thought, he said, stepping back. You can't fake it if you flinch every time. I told you, she said through gritted teeth. My species is not accustomed to casual contact. It overwhelms our senses. Okay, but what happens if someone at the gala hugs you? Jack challenged. I would neutralize the threat, she said matter-of-factly. Jack laughed, despite himself. Yeah, don't do that. Pretty sure snapping necks would blow our cover. She glared at him. Then teach me. Gladly, he said with a grin. But you gotta trust me first. I trust you to make inappropriate comments, she shot back. Ah, you're learning my sense of humor, he teased. Progress. Ignoring his smirk, she straightened her posture. What do I need to do? Jack's grin widened. All right, we're gonna do a little exercise. When I put my arm around you, don't pull away. Just stand there. Relax. She nodded reluctantly. He stepped behind her, resting his arm lightly across her shoulders. Her body immediately tensed. Okay, that's the opposite of relaxing, he said. I'm trying, she snapped. Try harder, he replied. Think of something that makes you happy. She frowned, as if the concept were foreign to her. Victory in battle. Sure, that works, Jack said. Now pretend you just won the biggest battle of your life and some guy's congratulating you. No big deal. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping slightly. There we go, he said softly. See? Not so bad. Before she could respond, the ship jolted as a warning alarm blared overhead. Perfect timing, Jack muttered, dropping his arm as Zaira instinctively reached for her weapon. We're being hailed, came the voice of the ship's pilot over the comms. Unregistered vessel approaching. Zaira turned to Jack. This may be our first test. Great, Jack said, cracking his knuckles. Time to see if all this bonding is paying off. The tension in the air was thick, and Jack could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins as the unknown ship drew closer. Zaira stood at the console, her fingers flying over the controls with precision. Her expression remained calm, but he could see the slight tension in her shoulders. What's the plan? Jack asked, glancing over his shoulder at her. We'll need to act fast, Zaira replied, her voice steady despite the obvious threat. If they're a threat, we'll deal with it swiftly. If they're not, we'll play the part. Jack cracked his knuckles, more out of habit than anything. Right, so just another day in paradise, huh? Play it cool and pretend we're not about to kill anyone? Zaira's eyes flicked to him. If it comes to that, yes. I love it when you're so comforting, Jack said with a grin. Focus, Jack, she snapped, clearly not in the mood for banter. Jack raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. I'm with you. Let's get through this unscathed, yeah? The comms crackled to life, a garbled voice coming through. Unidentified ship, state your purpose. You are entering restricted space. Zaira's hand hovered over the console as she prepared to respond, but Jack leaned in close, his voice a low whisper. Remember the part about blending in? Zaira shot him a sideways glance, then began to speak into the comms. We are travelers, seeking refuge in your space. We are unaware of the restrictions. There was a brief pause before the voice came back, less hostile but still cautious. Identify yourselves. Zaira kept her tone steady, almost mechanical. I am Zaira Valaris, a warrior of the Zinta clan. This is my companion. She hesitated, shooting Jack a look that could have peeled paint off a wall. Jack! We seek only passage. Jack gave her a quick thumbs up, though he knew she wasn't looking. Good job, babe, he muttered under his breath. I mean, a companion is totally what we are, right? Zyra shot him a glare that could have liquefied steel. Very well. The calm's voice responded, now a bit more relaxed. Proceed with caution. The Pleasure Gala is hosting important guests. Do not disrupt the event. Zyra exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, turning to Jack. We are in, she said, her tone far less tense now. Keep it professional. Always, Jack said, grinning ear to ear. Professional, yes. But don't you think we make a cute couple? Her eyes narrowed again. I will not tolerate your behavior if it jeopardizes this mission. Jack feigned shock. Jeopardize? Me? Never. I'm the picture of restraint. He paused for effect. Most of the time. Zyra didn't respond, her gaze focused on the view ahead. Jack couldn't help but chuckle to himself, but when he saw the galactic station looming ahead, his grin slowly faded into something more serious. The station was massive, dwarfing their tiny ship. Lights flashed across the surface, and the energy humming through the docking bay was palpable, even through the ship's walls. He could see why this place was so heavily guarded. The Pleasure Gala was as much about power as it was about indulgence. As they docked, Jack couldn't help but think about the gala. This was the big moment. The moment they were supposed to pull off the act. You ready? He asked, turning to Zyra, who was already strapping on her armor and checking her weapons. I do not need your readiness, Jack, she said, voice cold. We will do what needs to be done. Right. I'm sure your readiness is in top shape, Jack muttered under his breath. But before she could catch the remark, he grinned widely. Let's get this party started then. Zyra didn't respond, her focus entirely on the task at hand. They made their way to the airlock, where a group of well-dressed attendants awaited. Their eyes scanned Zyra and Jack, noting their arrival with polite but distant expressions. Zyra's stern demeanor didn't help, but Jack was all charm, offering a half-smile to one of the attendants who responded with a raised eyebrow. Welcome to the gala, the attendant said, her voice smooth and practiced. Please follow me to the main event. Your identities have already been confirmed. Jack smirked as they followed her, muttering to Zyra. I gotta say, this is starting to feel real. Look at us, looking like we belong. Zyra didn't reply, but Jack noticed her grip on her weapon tightening. This was the moment. They had to make it believable. If they didn't, everything would fall apart. The attendant led them into a grand hall, the lights dim but warm, casting an air of mystery and decadence. There were dozens of guests, each more opulent and extravagant than the last. The air was thick with luxury, and the intoxicating scent of exotic perfumes mixed with the hum of 100 conversations. Remember, Jack said under his breath, we're lovers, not fighters. Zyra's eyes narrowed at him, her voice barely audible. I don't need reminding. Good, Jack said, putting his arm around her waist. Because it's showtime. Zyra tensed at the touch but didn't pull away, as they moved deeper into the crowd. Jack could practically feel the disapproving stares of the other guests, but he wasn't about to let that stop him. He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, You're doing great, babe. Just act like you enjoy it. She stiffened but didn't push him away. The mission had begun. Jack's heart raced as they entered the gala hall. The plush atmosphere, the dazzling outfits, the low murmur of voices, all of it screamed opulence. He couldn't help but grin. This was exactly what they'd signed up for. Zyra, however, wasn't as thrilled. She stood stiffly beside him, eyes scanning the room like a hawk, every muscle taut. Her discomfort was palpable. We're supposed to be in love, remember? Jack whispered, giving her an exaggerated smile. You're killing the mood. Zyra shot him a look that could cut through steel. Do not push me, Jack. He chuckled, feeling the pressure mounting but pushing it down with humor. Relax. Let's just pretend, all right? Just a little. Fake it till you make it. As they moved further into the room, Jack took in the lavish decorations. Large crystal chandeliers hung above, casting a soft glow over the gathering. Waiters passed with trays of strange, colorful drinks, and alien dignitaries mingled, all of them whispering to one another in languages Jack couldn't begin to understand. Zyra's discomfort was getting worse. Her gaze darted from one guest to another, and Jack could tell she was assessing every potential threat, analyzing every detail of the room's layout. "Hey, relax," Jack muttered again. "We're not here for a fight. Just play along. Do not touch me unless absolutely necessary," she warned, her voice low. Jack raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't planning on it, but if you insist, I can make it necessary." Zyra's eyes locked on him, and for a moment, there was something fierce and challenging in her gaze. But before she could retort, a voice interrupted them. Well, if it isn't the Zinta warrior and her companion." Jack turned to see a tall, green-skinned alien dressed in what could only be described as a shimmering robe, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Baltar," Zyra greeted, her tone clipped. "I didn't expect to see you here." Baltar smirked. "I have many interests. Some of them involve watching the most intriguing of species. Like you, Zyra." He turned his eyes to Jack, sizing him up. "And your companion here, Jack? How fascinating. You've done well, it seems." Jack offered a polite smile. "Just trying to fit in, Baltar. You know how it is." Zyra, her eyes narrowing, turned slightly toward Jack. "Let's get this over with. We have more important matters to attend to." Balthar's smirk deepened. "Oh, I'm sure you do. But why rush? Enjoy the evening. There are many pleasures here for those who are willing to partake." He gave a knowing glance to Jack. "Of course, it's not all about what's on the outside, is it?" Jack's eyebrows shot up. "I'm not sure I follow you, friend." "Oh, I think you do." Balthar's voice lowered, his tone growing more predatory. "There are those here who know how to test boundaries. See what lies beneath the surface. Tell me, Jack, does your companion ever indulge in that kind of pleasure?" Jack stood a little straighter, his smile faltering. "I think you're misreading the situation, Baltar." "Perhaps," Baltar said with a knowing wink. "But that's what makes it so interesting. Who can say where the night will take us?" Before Jack could respond, Zyra stepped forward, her voice cold and sharp. "We are here for business, not for your games, Baltar. Do not mistake our presence for weakness." Baltar laughed, a deep, throaty sound. "Oh, I'm not mistaken. But you should be careful, Zyra. Not all games are won by warriors." Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Jack and Zyra standing in a tense silence. "Are you all right?" Jack asked quietly, watching her closely. "I am fine," she replied stiffly. "Just irritated." Jack nodded, realizing this was far from over. They needed to keep their cover intact, but with Balthar's warning hanging over them, things were about to get complicated. As they made their way deeper into the hall, Jack noticed that some of the guests were starting to eye them more intently. He kept his arm subtly around Zyra's waist, trying to look like the picture of a happy couple, but he could feel the weight of the eyes on them, the unspoken scrutiny. "This is getting real, isn't it?" Jack muttered, leaning in. "Can you feel the pressure?" "Don't be foolish," Zyra hissed, her eyes scanning the room again. "If we're not careful, we'll be exposed." Jack could feel his pulse quicken. The moment of truth had arrived. They needed to stay close, keep up the pretense, and somehow navigate this maze of politics, alien diplomacy, and, if Balthar's words were any indication, seductive games that were about to get far more intense. With a deep breath, Jack straightened his posture. He was a human, and over his head, but damn it, he wasn't going to let this go south without making a fight of it. "Well, if we're gonna fake this," he said with a grin, "might as well enjoy the ride, right?" Zyra didn't reply, but there was a brief flash of something in her eyes, maybe the beginning of trust, or maybe just acceptance of the situation. Either way, they were in it together now. Jack could feel the eyes on them as they moved deeper into the gala. The music pulsed in the background, an unfamiliar alien rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the air. He noticed that some of the guests had started to drift closer, their gazes lingering a little too long. He gave a quick glance at Zaira. Her posture was stiff, and her eyes scanned the room, darting from one face to the next. The tension between them was palpable, but it was now more than just a mission, it felt like a survival game. "Stay close," Jack murmured, keeping his hand lightly on her back as they navigated through the crowd. "We don't want to attract attention for the wrong reasons." Zaira didn't respond, but Jack could tell by the subtle way she leaned into his side that she was at least somewhat easing into the role. She had her own way of playing along, but he could feel the wariness still clinging to her every movement. It was a relief when the first official-looking alien approached them, breaking the awkward silence that had settled around them. "Ah, the famous Zinta warrior and her human companion. How delightful," the alien said with an exaggerated bow, his voice rich with a strange accent. "Welcome to the gala. We are honored by your presence." Jack shot him a smirk, his hand still resting casually on Zaira's back. "The pleasure's ours," he replied smoothly. "We're here to experience your hospitality, and maybe a bit of your culture." Zaira's eyes were hard, but she nodded politely, playing her part. "Indeed. We are grateful for your invitation." The alien's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A most interesting choice of partner, Warrior Zaira. I've heard that humans have unique tastes." Jack couldn't help himself, he grinned and added, "Unique? You could say that." He gave a quick, exaggerated wink at the alien, making Zaira stiffen beside him. She immediately shot him a glare, but he just chuckled, knowing full well it was all part of the act. "You are very bold for a human," the alien observed. His gaze flicked over to Zaira, a strange glint in his eye. "But I imagine that's what attracted you to her. It's no easy thing to keep a Zinter entertained." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Entertained? I'm sure there's more to it than that. But yes, I'm up for the challenge." Zaira's jaw clenched, and she took a step forward, her voice cold as ice. "I am not a prize to be won." The alien raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course not. But I imagine you both enjoy competing?" His smile was all teeth. "In more ways than one." The tension between them thickened as the alien's eyes lingered on them both, but Jack wasn't about to let this go unchecked. "We're here to enjoy the gala, not entertain you with your fantasies," he said, his tone firm. Zaira didn't speak, but Jack could feel her body tensing beside him. She was ready to snap, and part of him admired that about her. The alien held up his hands, a gesture of peace, or at least as much peace as a smile like his could convey. "My apologies. I didn't mean to offend. But we do welcome those who are willing to share their passions." He gave Jack a meaningful glance. "The gala's festivities often lead to unexpected partnerships. Sounds like a night of chaos waiting to happen." Jack muttered under his breath, his smile barely hiding his unease. The alien seemed to hear it anyway. "Oh, but that is the point, isn't it? Chaos is a form of liberation. Of freedom. Of letting go." Jack chuckled, trying to keep the situation light. "Maybe. But I think we'll pass on that for tonight." Zaira, who had been quiet until now, spoke up, her voice clipped. "We are not here for your games. We have business to attend to." The alien seemed to understand that they weren't in the mood for further conversation. With a final, lingering smile, he nodded and turned to leave. "Of course. Enjoy the night, Zinta warrior and her human. We will speak again soon." Jack exhaled in relief as the alien moved away, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "That was uncomfortable," he muttered. "You okay?" Zaira didn't answer immediately, her eyes scanning the room again. "I'm fine," she said at last. "Let's move forward." Jack didn't argue, though he could tell she was still on edge. They had to keep moving, keep the illusion intact. And if they didn't, it could all fall apart. "We'll stick to the plan," Jack said, keeping his tone light. "We get the intel, then get out." "That's it." Zaira nodded, but her gaze was hard, her mind clearly elsewhere. Jack was about to say something else when a soft voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, may I have a word with you?" They both turned to see another guest standing before them, a slender alien woman with flowing silvery hair and sharp, calculating eyes. Her smile was polite, but there was something about her that screamed danger. Jack's instincts went on high alert. "What's this about?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. The alien woman tilted her head slightly, studying them both. "I couldn't help but notice the chemistry between you two," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "It's intriguing." Jack was taken aback for a moment. "Chemistry? We're just here for the gala. No chemistry needed." The woman smiled again, and Jack's skin prickled. "Oh, I think there's more chemistry than you're letting on." Zyra's eyes narrowed, and her posture stiffened further. "We are not interested in whatever game you are playing." The alien woman's smile widened, but it wasn't friendly. "Not yet, maybe. But you will be." She gave a knowing glance to Jack. "All games have their consequences." Jack's gut tightened. This wasn't going to end well. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice low. The woman's smile faltered just slightly before she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving them both standing in the middle of the crowd, with the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. "That was unsettling," Jack said, his voice tight. "We need to get out of here. Now." Zyra didn't respond, but he could feel her unease as they moved further into the gala, deeper into the unknown.